Good afternoon, everybody. I know that we're gathering our food, but we have an unbelievable lecture to get to. And so thank you for joining us for our distinguished faculty lecture. Today, we're going to hear some outstanding presentations from each faculty member who earned the 2013 Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Teaching, for Distinguished Scholarship, or for Distinguished Service. These awards are given at commencement each year in recognition of the honorees' superb skills in the classroom, their achievements in their fields, and also their dedication to this university, its students, its community. Now, usually when these awards are presented, the honorees stand up. They're on the stage with me during commencement, and I get a chance to talk about them while they stand there quietly. And I tell you how wonderful they are. Today, they finally get their chance to talk. They get to talk about how wonderful they are themselves. Each of our honor professors will present this afternoon on the topic of their choice. And uniting this presentation this afternoon is the theme of common threads engaging our communities. Now, if I may expand on the theme for just a moment, I'd like to say that at first glance, a common thread tying together over 3 award winners may seem a little thin. Now, our 3 winners have very different expertise in national and state politics, in Asian Americans in the Commonwealth, in mindfulness therapy or anxiety disorders, in the inner workings of the financial markets. But to my mind, Professors Watanabe, Roemer, and Bando are linked through the models they provide for their students. Through their service, their scholarship, and their teaching, they invite students in. Professor Roemer engages her students in all levels of research. Professor Watanabe demonstrates that his service, and by extension theirs, has real-life positive effects in the communities they serve. And Professor Bando's enthusiasm for finance and accounting is contagious. He has a rooting section in the back. They model, and he models, and each of them models the correct approach to scholarship, the right attitudes for service, and the best mindset for teaching and for learning. And their students benefit immensely. In fact, we all benefit immensely, so we say thank you. I'm excited personally for this opportunity to learn from the best of our best. But before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our Dean of University Libraries, hiding back there in the corner somewhere, Daniel Ortiz. Thank you, Daniel. I can rely on you every year, you and your team, to plan this event for us, along with our events department. Thank you. I also want to thank the committee members who helped select the winners for the Chancellor's Award for Distinguished Teaching, Scholarship, and Service. I know I get notes. Chancellor, why wasn't I selected? There's a committee. And I won't even point out who they are, just in case I want to ask them to do it again. However, there's a committee. As always, they face a real challenge this year reading through all of your nominations, because you write some unbelievable nominations, and picking the winners. It's not an easy task when we have so many faculty members who are qualified, worthy, and just should be awarded over and over and over again. I appreciate the committee's great judgment and their commitment. Finally, thank you all for coming today. It's wonderful to see you out for your colleagues. I'm grateful to each of our award winners here today and every day as a member of this amazing faculty. It means a lot to me to see that you're all here to support your colleagues and your friends. This spirit of support and solidarity is what faculty members tell me they love about being here to work at this university. And so let's keep it going. And so with that, I am out of the way. And Provost, am I to introduce the Provost? Is that okay? So, It's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to introduce to you the academic leader of our institution, Dr. Winston Langley. Now, we just came from an honors course where I've had the chance to 12 students who are going to go on to South Africa as part of their course. And they talked about not just their class, but many of you in this room and the linkage, this notion of interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity and what it means to be a part of this institution. And so as I've come to get to know this university over the last 10 years, I am honored that we have someone who has risen through our faculty, leading as our provost at this time in our history. And so Dr. Winston Langley, come up and introduce this program. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's event. My comments will be very brief because I think we ought to be hearing from the distinguished colleagues, except to say that we have three thematic areas. Business, which in my mind has to do not so much with the particular areas with which we normally associate it, but it deals with the basic human urge to be part of a broader exchange. And if you think of business, that's what it is in the business of doing. And psychology, of course, you know that it has to do not just with the individual, but something having to do with the inner workings of a world we sometimes do not know we're externalizing, and to acquaint us with it. And then politics, of course, which has always said it is the queen of all disciplines because it deals with the broader public sphere which encompasses everything else. We do know that scholarship, service, and teaching represent the three great areas of what the sociologists would call the structure-functional areas of our university. I see them as a sort of lignin, you know, as reading New York Times this morning and thinking that they were using this term lignin a little differently than I had understood it, went to check on it again. But it's that amorphous substance which, when put together with cellulose, is responsible for the trunk that we see that become the trees that are the environment in which we thrive. And if you can think of this university's trunk, you can think in terms of those three areas: service and teaching and scholarship, as it were, when combined with our students, faculty and staff that give expression to the tree of the university that we know. So I'm particularly pleased that we are together this afternoon to enjoy part of that trio that is going to be, I hope, defining attribute of this university as long as it exists. And I am asked to introduce our first speaker, Lizabeth Roemer.
It's a real honor to have an opportunity to be here to represent the psychology department and the clinical psychology program, and to talk a little bit about an approach to scholarship that I hope is really the approach that UMass Boston embodies. And so I'm really going to spend time today talking about sort of the process of scholarship and just a teeny little bit about content. So I'm going to talk about a relational and community approach to scholarship. So that is hopefully my common thread. Hopefully I've met the request. I'm going to just very briefly talk about the content of my scholarship, and I want to start by saying that there's no such thing as my scholarship. It is scholarship that comes from a team. So the work that I've been doing that was recognized by this award is work that I've done really closely with Sue Arcillo, a good friend and long-term collaborator of mine, and also with my doctoral students, current and past. And the work that we've been doing, just to put a little frame on kind of what I spend my time thinking about and writing about, is broadly speaking, helping people to reclaim their lives and sort of a meaningful life in the face of a whole range of challenges, whether that's internal challenges like anxiety disorders, or external stressors, or traumatic experiences, or systemic inequities and oppression, and sort of working to help people across these contexts live meaningful lives. I'm going to talk really, really briefly about how we do that, but I encourage you all to read stuff we've written or come and ask me if you want to know more. But there's sort of three things generally that we target. Helping people to notice the reactions that they have. Like, for instance, I might notice right now that my palms are sweating just a little bit, that my heart's a little bit faster than it sometimes is, and perhaps have compassion for that as opposed to criticism. We know from our research that criticism of those responses is part of what leads to more difficulties. So I could say, well, it's a little stressful to stand up here in front of the provost and the chancellor and most of my department. So okay, that's a reasonable thing. I might then accept my internal experiences instead of trying to get rid of them. I might talk about them. That's the thing I do. But generally, we know that when we try to get rid of the thoughts we're having or the feelings we're having or the memories we're having, that they come back more. So accepting them can be beneficial. And all of that really in service of trying to do what's important to us. Often the people that I work with come in saying, like, I want to feel differently. But they want to feel differently so that they can do something that's important. And so what I help them do is kind of shift the focus to what is it that you want to be doing. And kind of in that vein, what I really want to talk about in the very brief time I have here is, why do we do scholarship? Why does it matter? I think about this a lot, spend a lot of time teaching students, undergraduates, and particularly the fantastic doctoral students in our program. And I feel that often we are taught that certain things matter in scholarship. The number of publications we have, the grants we get and the amount of money that we bring in, individual recognition for ideas, being able to stand up here myself and say, hey, I'm a scholar and I got this award, right? An award. So this idea that it is singular, that it is specific, that it is so that people say, oh, look, she's a very good scholar. And I recently came across the work of a social psychologist, Jennifer Crocker, who talks about these kinds of goals as self-image goals. Goals that in our interactions, what we're trying to do is have other people think highly of us. We all do this, right? This comes up for all of us. These are thoughts we have. At the same time, the research suggests that that's not a very sort of healthy way to be in the world, that it creates a lot of distress and discomfort, that that even when we meet those goals, then we just have other goals that we haven't met yet. I got this many publications, but this person next to me has more. And so there's this risk from these goals that it actually undermines our productivity and our well-being. And I think when I was being trained, I had the sense that a successful scholar is somehow this like solitary person alone with a computer, a really messy desk, just trying to get out as many publications as possible because quantity matters. It doesn't really matter what you publish, just publish. Lines on your CV. With high-profile publications, with the advantage being the more rigorous the publication as opposed to like the more people who will read it or the more lives it will affect. And this kind of emphasis on measurable outcomes. I remember when I was an intern, I went to a professional development seminar that actually one of my advanced doctoral students just went to recently, the same one, in which this person, who I won't name, said the same thing, which was that what you should be doing to be successful as an academic is only things that will be lines on your CV. So when somebody asks you to do something, you should think to yourself, how will this translate into a line on my CV? And I remember when he said that to me, and I thought, oh God, I'm not gonna be an academic. Because I thought I wanted to be an academic. I thought I really enjoyed this. I thought I really liked scholarship and writing, but I don't wanna do that. And so I, along with other people who similarly didn't wanna do that, I sort of thought, well, like maybe I'll try to be a different kind of academic. Maybe that's not true. It occurred to me that the person who was teaching this had actually never gotten an academic job, and so it was possible that he didn't know what he was talking about. So I thought that it would be helpful to have a different model, and I think this is the reason I came to UMass Boston 17 years ago, was because I thought I could do this here. I thought that this was a place where there were three pillars, where people would not only care about my scholarship, but would care about my scholarship within the context of other things, like service and teaching. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these, but just to think about that scholarship can be characterized by collaboration. It is not individual. That scholarship is a context for teaching. For me, the most rewarding thing about the scholarship that I do is the teaching that I do in it. Every time I look at my students, I feel like I'm going to cry. So I'm going to stop looking at them. Scholarship as service, thinking that the scholarship that you're doing is to make a difference in the world in some form, in some way. And these, conveniently, Jennifer Crocker describes as compassion goals. So as goals that are about other people and yet actually lead to gains for the individual as well. So in fact, what research suggests is that if you do things genuinely for the well-being of other people, unsurprisingly, those people actually then care about the well-being of you. And so it feeds back. And so that it isn't the case that if it isn't a line on your CV, it's not the case, one, that it doesn't matter, but interestingly, it's also not the case that it doesn't end up helping your career. It's not the case that it doesn't end up helping you get a scholarship award. So that's my bottom line message. I'm just going to give a couple examples of that. So this is the fantastic Susan Orsillo, who is one of my very close friends and someone who I've been doing collaborative research with since 1994. We've written a couple of books together. And I just counted this morning, 50% of my publications are with Sue. So half of this is Sue, at least. And many, many more of the things I write were influenced by Sue, whether or not she's on them. So when I was junior and I started working with Sue, people told me that I shouldn't do all my work with one other person because it wouldn't be clear that I had individual contributions. And I thought that that seemed silly. And it was really clear to me once I started working with Sue that everything I did was better, because she's brilliant, and because we were able then to think about everything we were doing from multiple sides, and that's better. It's better. It helped with our clarity. It helped with the breadth of our thinking. And so what we did from the very beginning is we switched off who is first author. And so we each have plenty of first author publications, but we had the opportunity to write a lot together, to think a lot together. It meant a different one of us could carry it at different times, particularly if people were having challenges in their life, someone else could carry it. So for me, it's been really one of the most rewarding things of my career. We also created a context in which we could include other people, like Dr. Sarah Hayes-Skelton, who is unfortunately homesick today, but who came to us very junior and fortunately for UMass Boston, then stayed with us as an independent faculty member. She improved our work. She added statistical expertise so that we were able to look at things like common factors across treatment, the process of change, things that we wouldn't have been able to do without her that made our work better. Doesn't seem to have held back her productivity any. She will certainly be up here probably in much less than 20 years, talking to you all about her scholarship at some point. So again, I think this idea of working with other people, of developing those relationships, is not counter to success. It's not counter to individual success. It's also just so much more fun, which I think is important. I think from that model, it's really easy then to involve doctoral students, which is something that I do a lot of. At this point, I would say that the work of my team is driven by my doctoral students, is driven by what they're interested in, and that means it's more recent than what I was taught. It means that it's influenced by the other faculty, the fantastic faculty who teach in my program, because they get taught by them, and that expands their interest in the things they do. One of the things I love about my team, and there are many, and we don't have time, but one is that my students are more excited about each other's successes than they are about their own, consistently, in a tremendously genuine way. So when anyone on my team has a success, like a publication or gives a talk or has a great idea, everyone else is incredibly excited about that. And so that means that it's more fun and we generate more. And I think our productivity, and we are very productive. So I also counted in about 50% of my publications are with graduate students from this program, also undergraduates. And that productivity comes from shared goals and values and relational factors. We like being together, so we do more because we enjoy being together without an emphasis on individual achievement. We also work within a vertical lab, which means that my senior doctoral students mentor and care about my junior doctoral students, and who in turn mentor and care about students, which means they're learning how to teach, which means they're getting excited about teaching. And certainly the graduates from my lab and from our program in general have gone on to be fantastic mentors across the country and the world, and really committed to mentoring. And I think that comes from this environment. And it also expands everyone's area of expertise. So students within my lab do different kinds of work, but they know about each other. So there are students in my team, for instance, who study the impact of racism and buffers and resiliency factors in the face of racism. There are other students in my lab who don't do that work themselves, but they are tremendously affected by learning about this and thinking about this. It affects them in the world. Last week, an undergraduate student who was transcribing interviews from Black American participants talking about the experience of racism talked to one of my graduate students about how that changed her in the world. So that's a way that that work is sort of generating out, and people are learning from each other and being changed as people, as students, as teachers, as clinicians, and as scholars. I do think of scholarship as service, so we think a lot in my team about how to make a difference in the world. I mean, I think it's a little inherent in clinical psychology. We probably chose clinical psychology because we sort of wanted to make a difference, but we think pretty broadly. Again, as I said, my students are really affected from being within the program, so certainly from people like my colleague Karen Siamoto and others have learned a really strong commitment to social justice and to systemic inequities, and that has infiltrated my work. That's not something that I was trained in, but that's something that my lab has really turned to because of these ways that we work together. I think that makes us, I think it makes us feel more of a sense of accomplishment from the work that we do. So we take on things like the impact of racism. I have a doctoral student, or not yet, but a soon-to-be doctoral student. Well, she's a doctoral student, but anyway, she hasn't worked on her dissertation yet, who's starting to think about how to help cultivate allies, so how to help people in positions of privilege to work across difference. So that's another way of trying to do research that matters. A couple of years ago, my team really drew me to take the treatment work that I was doing off campus and bring it onto campus, because they felt like students on campus, y'all may have noticed, also experience anxiety and stress, and that perhaps treating people at a clinic across town was not the best way to be using our expertise. And so because of that, we've developed stress management workshops that we've been running on campus. We're planning to expand them. It's been extremely rewarding. We are doing it as scholarship. We're presenting those data. We're showing changes, significant changes from this 1.5-hour workshop, which is pretty exciting, but also thinking about sort of how to do more of that, how to, as one of my doctoral students call it, infiltrate and have more of an impact. And in addition, I think our scholarship has turned a lot, certainly Sue and I, towards training and dissemination. So not just studying what's helpful for people, but then also studying, like, how do we get that out to people in the world? It's not enough to say, like, oh, we have an effective treatment. We want to, like, have an effective treatment that people actually receive. And the last point I just want to say is I think there's also an image of scholarship as, well, if you're a successful scholar, that's all you do. You're alone in that room that's really messy with your computer, and you have to do that all the time. I don't think that's true. So I think we talk a lot about having a balanced life. I think the relational context of our work helps us have some balance while we're working. We genuinely care about each other. We have genuine, real relationships. Like I said, Sue's one of my best friends, so when I'm working with her, I'm also with my best friend. But in addition, we talk about attending to self-care and balance in life. And I talk to my students about that. I try really hard to model that. I've had a cold for the last month, so I'm not really sure that I'm modeling it super well right this minute, but I really try. I also think that having a model of a scholar as living a balanced life is a more inclusive model. I think it creates the possibility for more people to be able to be successful scholars and have a voice in the field. I think if the voice of scholarship is that you have to, like, not care about your family and never go to the movies and not be with your kids, that is not a model that then includes enough voices, and we need everybody's voice. And particularly if we're trying to help people, we need to be living complicated lives so that we can understand the lives that people are living and not be living this really narrow life. So I think that, again, that these things are not counter. I think that these are sort of principles that I've really tried to base my career on. And I've had grants, and I've brought in some money, and I have actually kind of a lot of publications, and I got this award. So, like, those things happened, but I didn't do it for this. Although I like this, don't get me wrong. But this wasn't the point, and this isn't the piece that I care about, and it's not the thing that makes me get up in the morning. It's not the thing that makes me get in front of my computer. So the thing that does is all these people. So I usually do this at the beginning, but my partner felt I should say it at the end, so here I am. I want to thank Alice Carter, Karen Sumono, and Sarah Hayes Skelton, particularly for writing letters and very busy lives with much letter writing, and the psych department in general for nominating me for this. Sue, I already said, my doctoral students, my undergrad students who are responsible for the most of the pieces of data that make the scholarship that we write and making sure that it's good. My parents who taught me to care about things and to think that I can do everything. And my partner who helps me do that. And I just wanted to end with a little picture of my scholarship community. So that's Sue at my wedding. That's all my doctoral students at that time, past and present, at my wedding. And then the top is my more recent doctoral students in Hawaii this summer. In a picture that they sent me, sorry. I might have stolen it from someone's Facebook page. Look how happy they are. So that's it. Thank you very much. And I also I want to apologize because I actually have to leave because I have another community commitment and we have a diversity committee meeting soon. So as I've already told Paul and Mondo, I'm going to be watching their talks when they're posted online. But I do want to introduce Paul Watanabe, who received the Distinguished Service Award for a lifetime of leadership and service here at UMass Boston.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by asking you to take you back to a time almost 50 years ago in December. And the event is the founding convocation of a new university. This is a university with barely 200 faculty and about 1,500 students. Of course, it is the founding convocation held in December of 1966 of the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And these are the beginning words of the Chancellor, John Ryan, who spoke. These are the first words he spoke at that convocation. Today, we join together in symbol and ceremony to invite the attention of the world to a beginning, a stirring, and emergence. Today's significance is not of victories won or glories past. Rather, today's significance is that of promise, of dedication, of advent, if you will, of what is to come. And what is to come? What is to be expected of this new university whose first step we witness and acknowledge today? Of course, that new university is the one that you're a part of, this community that you're a part of, the University of Massachusetts, Boston. And it's a university that was dedicated to and fully mindful of where it was, its location in the state of Massachusetts. For example, he goes on to state, the University of Massachusetts in Boston is an idea, a vision. This university will respond to the demands and challenges of its urban environment. The University of Massachusetts in Boston will be urban in character, urban in commitment to public service, urban in student body origins and destinies, urban in faculty research interests, urban in the flavor of its institutional culture and values and outlook. We will consider to be crucial in every operational decision on site, faculty, curriculum, program, enrollment, and organization, the degree to which any alternatives may strengthen the capacity of the institution to respond to the intellectual and utilitarian needs of urban life in Massachusetts, the nation, and the world. In other words, the founding vision and idea of UMass Boston recognized the urban challenge broadly and the expectation that the university would engage in service focused on addressing that particular challenge. And I would argue that we were intentionally distinct in embracing this particular challenge, distinct from the other UMass university that existed at that time, the campus at Amherst. And it's even true today. In a recent revision of the University of Massachusetts Amherst mission statement, which was approved by the Board of Trustees, their one real purpose was to make sure that their vision statement affirmed what they called UMass Amherst as the flagship campus of the University of Massachusetts. Let me tell you what is in our mission. I don't know if you know the words of our mission, but in part, UMass Boston's mission is our distinguished scholarship, dedicated teaching, and engaged public service are mutually reinforcing. You've heard this message by Liz and by the provost and by the chancellor, creating new knowledge while serving the public good of our city, our commonwealth, our nation, and our world. That's UMass Boston's mission. I don't know about you, but I would rather be at a place that embraces service rather than affirms one's self-proclaimed exalted status as a flagship university. So what about the beginning that Chancellor Ryan talked to, the stirring, the emergence, that idea and the vision that were talked about half a century ago? What about the urban challenges? Now, I wrote an introduction to a monograph that we had many writers from the Institute for Asian American Studies, the Gaston Institute, and Trotter wrote in 1994, 96. So this is sort of in the midpoint of this journey. And this is one thing that I wrote in the introduction, and it's a sobering assessment of Boston 20 years ago. I'm going to read from it. The beginning of this was, Bostonians love celebrations, fireworks on the Esplanade, tall ships sailing majestically in the harbor, the Boston Marathon, and a championship for the Celtics this was written a long time ago when the Celtics were winning championships, for the Celtics elicit exuberance and pride in the hearts of the city's residents. Civic spirit is one of Boston's most endearing qualities. There is another side of to Boston that is less recognized. While large numbers of residents may come together to celebrate too often, there is a feeling, particularly in the Black, Latino, and Asian American communities, that serious problems are hidden and they are left to deal with them alone. For some ethnic minorities, it is difficult to create a true sense of civic pride beyond their own communities. The city does not work for a large proportion of these people in fundamental ways, economically, socially, culturally, educationally, or politically. Instead of uplifting the spirit, a sense of alienation and the racial differences that often feed it are enduring. And I ended this introduction with these words: contradictions, challenges, changes, opportunities, and the desire to build a sense of community with diversity are the themes of this report. All of these suggest that important decisions lie ahead for those struggling to hold on to power in Boston and those desiring to have it shared more equitably. For many individuals in Boston's racial and ethnic communities, the choices available are fraught with uncertainty. Should people be guided by their own assessment of the harsh, troubling, and prolonged realities they face daily, or by the hope that things can and will change for the better? The noted poet Phyllis Wheatley, a Black slave, accounted for the inner power and sustaining vision of women caught in wretched slavery and starving for freedom by stating, "She feeds on truths and uncreated things." How much longer can those in the city relegated to the sidelines be expected to gain sustenance, not from what is, but from what can be? The unconfronted challenge, as Langston Hughes so eloquently posed it, is what happens to a dream deferred. So what about these urban challenges today? The urban challenges do remain, and in some cases they have worsened. They have intensified in the city of Boston that we love. For example, 23% of the residents of Boston live in poverty. 32% of our children, a third of our children in the city live in poverty. Racial inequities remain. Black, Latino, and Asian per capita income is less than half of that of whites who live within our city. Disparities in unemployment rates, health, school dropout rates, etc., still exist. This is the unconfronted challenge, or the unsolved challenge in the city of Boston. And these are big, these are deep, these are difficult, these are long-lasting challenges. To be true to this campus's founding vision and purpose and expectation, we needn't solve all of these challenges, but we must. We must be fully engaged in addressing them. That is our mission at this institution. You know, there's a guy profile, maybe you read it in the Boston Globe about this guy on Thanksgiving Day. There was a piece about this guy who cooks Thanksgiving dinner for just people who don't have a place to go. He's from Melrose. I don't know if you read that piece. But I was struck by when he was asked why he does it, why he goes and cooks, he shops and cooks all these meals himself for anybody who doesn't have a home, a place to go. And he said, quote, "It means less talk and more action. If you're not going to do anything, get lost." That, in some ways, I've been looking for profound messages about service. I found it in this Melrose guy who was cooking turkeys for Thanksgiving. If you're not going to do anything, get lost. UMB has been engaged. And I recognize and I acknowledge the many ways that people in education and the environment and a variety of different ways have taken on this challenge of UMass Boston and engaged in it, and we're central to it. For example, I was privileged to be asked by the newly elected mayor to be a co-chair of his transition team. Actually, this afternoon, I think right now, he is releasing the names of over 200 people are part of 11 working groups that are going to assist him in helping to set the agenda for the new administration. When you go through that list, you are going to see that there is no university in this city of universities, this Athens of America, has more names on those working groups than the University of Massachusetts, Boston. We are engaged in these purposes. We are engaged in these endeavors. And let me remind you, for the faculty here, the language of the Red Book, which you've remembered, I'm sure. If you haven't, you've learned it. Personnel recommendations and decisions shall be made only after review of all of the qualifications and all the contributions of the individual in the areas of teaching or research, creative or professional activity, and of service. Now, some may regard this particular demand, these particular ideas, as a burden. I fully disagree with them. For some, the Holy Trinity is sort of God, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. For MacArthur, it was duty, honor, country. For some, I guess Caesar, it was Veni, Vidi, Vici. For others, it's Larry, Shep, and Mo. For me, the Holy Trinity is research, teaching, and scholarship. This is not a burden. It is a privilege to have a job that your job description is that you are expected, encouraged, and hopefully supported to do research, teaching, and service. The vision and the idea, the expectations, and the promise that were articulated at that convocations nearly 50 years ago, and a sincere commitment to realizing them, are what make this campus a special place, almost a unique place. It certainly is what attracted me to UMass Boston 35 years ago, over 35 years ago. I got a 25-cent subway ride from Cambridge to come here and do my interview. That was the first time I stepped on this campus. It attracted me then, 35 years ago, and it's still true when I travel to UMass Boston today, for I figured over the 8,000th time, by the way, 8,000 times. And I drove to the campus and drove around and around and around and around trying to find a parking space. It's what attracted me then, and it what attracts me now 8,000 times later to this particular campus, this mission, this special place. Finally, I was asked to give some idea about my inspiration. Let me say very simply, my parents, who, because of their race and because of their poverty, suffered a great deal. They were placed in America's concentration camps during World War II, and they suffered indignities because of their race and because of their poverty. And so often their answer to me was one that's familiar to a lot of people who are Japanese or study the internment. The people sort of simply shook their heads, as my parents did, and said, "Shikata ganai," which means nothing can be done about it. That was their sort of answer. I understood for them, who were powerless, that little could be done about it. But with the privileges that I have, with the privileges that we have, when we witness poverty and when we witness racism and prejudice of any kind, when we face senseless war and the threats to opportunity, something must be done about it. Thanks. I am now supposed to introduce the next speaker, and everybody's been calling him Bondo, but no, I am going to pronounce his name correctly because Professor Peter Kyung had his students many years ago, 1994, put together something called Recognizing Names, a guide for UMass Boston student perspectives on pronouncing Asian names. And on page 21 is our next speaker's name. So if I screw up, it's the student's fault. His name is, and I'm known to admire him at these sort of little opportunities we've had to meet, Arindam Bandopadhyaya. And by the way, his name means, and he did tell me they got it right, invincible. So the invincible Professor Bando. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I admire your brave. You tried to pronounce my last name, and you did a very good job. Thank you for that. Thank you all for coming. I know it's a busy time of the year, so I particularly appreciate you being here. Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Provost, for putting this together. What I want to do is I want to actually put on my professorial hat for a little while, tell you a long-winded story, and hopefully at the end of it there's a point. At the end of it, I want to talk about what I do in my teaching, how that all ties in with engaging the community. So I just want to begin by asking you, who remembers the financial crisis? Good for you. Let me remind you of a few things that come to my mind. Remember Lehman Brothers. Remember AIG. Remember TARP. Remember Hank Paulson. Remember fears of the Great Depression, which fortunately did not materialize. Remember banks sitting on a lot of money, oodles of money that they were given by the Federal Reserve, but they were not willing to lend any of that because everybody was a credit risk. Remember companies who could not borrow in the commercial paper market and were unable to meet payroll obligations. Remember the crash of the financial market, the bottom falling out, trillions of dollars lost in wealth. Much of the retirement savings that we had wiped out, 50%. And the list goes on. So many things we can think about the financial crisis. And I'm glad many of you raised your hands to say that you remember the financial crisis. It's been so long ago. But what I want to get onto is who cares? And I really don't. And here, please, don't send me email messages this evening saying that you should care and you are in finance and what is it that you're saying that we shouldn't care about the financial crisis. When I say it perhaps even does not apply to you. It's a generic I. I don't really care. Why I don't care? I brought some charts for you, which I made yesterday. Some of these guys know these charts well. I don't care. This is, there are 3 lines here. The blue line that represents the market, summarizes the market, how the market has been doing since 2009, January of 2009. Up 125%, somewhere between 100 and 150%, 125%. The green line represents the financial sector, the banks that we bailed out, turned around, did some things for themselves. The investors liked them. The financial sector as a whole has done extremely well since 2009. Some hiccups in between, but have recovered. Their losses that they had incurred are up more than 100% since 2009. I brought for you just what many think is one of the villains of the financial crisis, AIG. Remember AIG? We punished AIG, but the AIG stock has recovered and has become the darling of many investors. If you invested in AIG since 2009 in January, you're up 50%. And if you're like one of these guys sitting here, they're good at doing this. If you were able to catch one of the troughs, you're up more than 50% in what we had considered one of the reasons as to why there might have been a systemic problem in the financial system. So really, it seems like that the market has shrugged off much of what we had seen in the financial crisis. I have shrugged off in between as the market has grown over the last few years. You are familiar with all this. Remember that as this was taking place, as the market was growing robustly, yes, with some hiccups, there was a downgrade of the US debt. Remember that? There's a downgrade of the US debt. The US debt, the US Treasury, the T-note, the T-bond, the T-bills that we considered riskless assets, risk-free assets, are no longer risk-free anymore. I seem to have shrugged that off. Nothing in life is certain except death and taxes. So why should I expect payments from the Treasury be a certainty? So I've sort of shrugged that off. I have shrugged off a couple of debt ceiling debates. Close to default we were a couple of times. Somehow we were able to put an agreement together that has postponed the problem somewhat. I have shrugged that off. I've kicked the problem down the road. And not for me to worry. Somebody else will pick it up sometime in the future. Fiscal cliff, I've shrugged the fiscal cliff off. There's uncertainty in the market. People were a little bit nervous. We actually went over the fiscal cliff on the 1st of January. We put some hasty bandages to address some of the problems. The uncertainty went off. The market rallied. I was happy. I shrugged off the sequester and the government shutdown. You remember that? That happened recently. I'm happy now that the government is back up and running, and a little amused that it's having more technical difficulties in operating websites than I usually do. But I'm happy that they are back. The market doesn't seem to care. There's a long list of other items that I don't care about. I don't care about the fact that unemployment rate is extremely high, has recovered from unprecedented highs a few years ago, but still at levels that we may find unacceptable, but I don't seem to care about that. I must read this number out for you. You know this. I did this on Friday, so this number has changed. 17,214,589,343,194 is our national debt, growing at $2.69 billion every day, which means that in the time that I actually read this number off, we are a couple of $1 million more in debt. And if you think you're not carrying any debt on your credit card, that's okay. But everybody in this room owes somebody $54,277. So hold on to your wallets. Somebody might come after us one of these days to get that. But I don't care. I don't care. I've shrugged all that off. The market has grown 125%. I've done extremely well. My optimism and my euphoria is actually shared. I'm not alone. Silicon Valley is back to the dot-com days. I took this headline off the New York Times on the 27th of November. Silicon Valley is partying like it's 1999. Private equity funds, venture capitalist funding is flowing into Silicon Valley like it has in the dot-com era. There are many companies, there are many tech firms that are going IPO. They are raising billions of dollars in the market. There's valuations of these companies are in billions of dollars. When they're generating no revenues, they have no revenues to show for. Remember the subprime mortgages that caused a lot of problems, perhaps brought the onset of the financial crisis. They're back. They had fallen out of fashion for some time, but they are back. You might actually be invested in some of these subprime mortgages. You don't know, but you are perhaps invested in some of these subprime mortgages. Leveraged loans which were popular during the subprime era, are back. And I read this disturbing statistics, but I don't really care. I read this disturbing statistic that if you look at the leveraged loans that were outstanding in November, which means that there's still 2 more months to go as we are counting, the levels of leveraged loans that we have right now is larger than what we had in the pre-crisis levels. So, finally, we all know this. I don't need to remind you. Some of my New York colleagues are here, so if you're looking for a house in Massachusetts and Boston, I hope you're bringing your checkbook with you to the open house, because during the first half hour of the open house, there are 5 offers. So the real estate market is booming. It's red hot. The Case-Shiller Index, which tracks housing prices in the US economy, is in uncharted territory. And Robert Shiller, he was one of the recipients of the Nobel Prize in economics. He's in the business of predicting bubbles in asset markets, and he says that the real estate market in the US economy is bubbly. So I'm not alone. The euphoria, the optimism that I have is shared by others. And I have just not been euphoric and thinking about what has been happening in the market. I have been actually participating in the rise of the market. How? I've been taking loans at APRs, converting the APRs into EARs. I've been investing in CDOs, SIVs, ETFs, AIs, large caps, mid caps. I've been placing orders on different types of orders: market orders, limit orders, stop loss orders on the NYSE, on the NASDAQ, on the CBOE, on the CME. And I've added this here not because I really want to, not because I'm greedy, well, just a little bit. Not because I really want to, but I'm forced to. You know that defined benefit pension plans, for example, are a thing of the past, and we are almost forced to participate in the market, whether we like it or not. Interest rates are so low, there is so much liquidity in the market, interest rates are so low that it's not worth a trip to my bank to deposit my money. So I'm doing all this. I'm doing all this investment activity. I get up every day. I get into my E-Trade account. I get into my Morgan Stanley account, and I'm doing all this investing. All well and good, except that while I do all this, I'm really clueless. I really don't know what I am doing. And I'm not worried about that either, because I'm not alone. I'm not alone in my ignorance. Because, and I've brought for you just a few numbers to consider. Thanks, Paul, for some statistics that you brought. I thought that I was bringing in a few numbers, perhaps too many for you to care about. But there's ample evidence as we look around, as we think about what is happening in the US, there's ample evidence to show that there is lack of financial knowledge, lack of financial literacy and skills. 41% of the adults, 41% of us here would give us a C, a D, or an F grade in our knowledge of personal finance. 77 million people last year did not pay their bills on time, some because they could not. But many, 56% of us, 56% of adults over 18 years old do not actually keep a budget, and therefore are unable to meet our obligations in a timely manner sometimes. A third of us, 1 out of 3, we don't save. And those of us who save, a third of 33% of us do not save for retirement. Many of us worry that we are not saving for a rainy day. And even if we are saving for a rainy day, close to 70% of us have enough savings that is going to cover us in an emergency for more than 3 months, which of course, financial advisors will tell you that you must have at least a year's worth of savings in case there's an emergency. We fall way short of that. Particularly teens and young adults are at particular risk. Some studies will tell you that the 18 to the 24-year group, 60% of them are financially literate, but it's a generous definition of financial literacy, I think. 2/3 of this age group cannot read a bank statement, cannot balance a checkbook accurately. 2/3 of this group. 4/5 do not know how the stock market works, do not know the difference between a stock and a bond. We are investing in stocks and bonds, but we do not know the difference between stocks and bonds. I just heard this today. Student loans upwards of $1 trillion, but 50% of the 18 to the 24-year-old do not know, they themselves think that they do not know how to effectively use a credit card. We've not left our teens and young adults alone. We as adults, we worry about them. There's a worldwide survey of adults on how we feel, how much we feel the youth in our country know about financial markets, know about finance. US ranks 27th in that survey. Many of us feel that we should be helping the young adults in being more financially responsible, but we ourselves feel that we need more direction. We need more knowledge ourselves in order to be able to supervise and inform the young adults that lack in financial literacy. And in Massachusetts particularly, we are frustrated because again, a study that a group conducts, a nationwide study, efforts to teach the ABCs of financial literacy in high school. Massachusetts actually receives an F grade. We don't actually pass. So the current state of financial literacy, I think, is troublesome to say the least. We are asked to participate in the financial markets, but with little training and little knowledge of what is actually going on. And this is where we come in, because here at UMass Boston in the College of Management in my department, we have not taken this sitting down. We've taken this to heart, and what we are doing is filling a void. The community that is here, we are trying to educate them in the various aspects of finance in many different ways. Of course, we have our finance curriculum, ranging from basic classes in finance. We teach classes in finance where you can appreciate and understand the very basics in personal finance. We have more sophisticated classes in corporate finance and in investments. We have graduate level classes that will train you in risk management, preparing our students, our community for the workforce that is out there. We engage our students and our community through hands-on experience. We have a student-managed fund, actually a couple of student-managed funds right now, with the persistence of some of the students who came to me many years ago. We were able to obtain some seed funding from the UMass Foundation. They gave us $25,000 to go out and invest for them. We've grown that fund from $25,000 through growth and additional contributions that we have obtained right now. As I speak, the market value of that fund is about $85,000. We have, in the meantime, have also started a graduate student managed fund. The market value of that is about $50,000. We are thinking of starting a new fund that is going to invest in international securities. So providing our students, all our students do the management of that, of those portfolios, those 3 portfolios. Every Monday evening, the upper level of the Healy Library becomes a place where we present our stock pitches. We discuss our stock pitches on Thursday mornings. My office becomes a trading floor. There are people who are milling around, placing trades, discussing stocks, managing the portfolio every week. We provide our students and the community with a Bloomberg certification. We give them that opportunity. Bloomberg certification, many of you know, has become the standard of the industry, where you go and get your data and do your analysis. That's become the industry standard. We're able to provide them that opportunity. Many of the elite institutions that are around here do not provide that opportunity, but we have been able to do that. We have a Bloomberg lab here in the library, which I believe is occupied pretty much 24 hours a day. We have to throw people out of the Bloomberg lab because we have to close it at some time. People are there over the weekends. We engage our community through trips, field trips, a couple of which I have listed here. We have been to the trading floor of State Street. The head of the trading floor actually hosts us there, gives us a 45-minute seminar on what the traders do. Then we walk around. The traders tell us what their roles are, what their functions are. We went to the Fidelity stock chart room last year. We saw in action how people look at charts, and by looking at momentums that they are able to derive from movements in asset prices, they are generating buy and sell signals. And then last year, this was my highlight of my professional career. Many of my students said that it was their highlight of their student career, but we were able to go to the New York Stock Exchange. We left at 7 o'clock in the morning. We got into a bus. We got outside the New York Stock Exchange. We toured the stock exchange. We walked around the trading floor. We talked to the designated market makers, saw what they did. They placed some trades for us to see how the market moves once a trade is placed. And then we got to see the closing bell, the ringing of the closing bell. We were able to clap with the people with the closing of the market. We are engaging the community with our financial literacy workshops. The provost was there at one of the workshops that we organized for a group of teen women who are at risk. They decided a couple of years ago that they'll spend 2 days of their April break in coming and learning more about financial calculators, financial literacy, that they otherwise would not have obtained other places. We are in the process of developing some financial calculators that will allow you to calculate your net worth, will allow you to calculate how much you should be saving each month to meet your retirement needs. What is your personal inflation rate? The inflation rate that comes out every month is an inflation rate that applies to everyone, but you have your own inflation rate. We are in the process of developing that. We have a financial services forum that is very active. Among other things that we do, we have a financial services forum speaker series. We invite speakers from the industry. They come here, address some of the students, talk about what they do in their work, how the academic content of what we do in our classrooms is linked to what they are doing. And we also engage in our own research in finance, but we are also engaging our students in research in finance through the undergraduate honors program that we have, through the honors program that Rajni has at the university level. And through our master's thesis options, we engage our graduate students in research in finance. Fantastic research work that they do, presented at national and international conferences, published in scholarly journals. So we have not taken what we see around us sitting down. We are trying to fill a void with what we do in the classroom and beyond. And what this award has meant to me, I was asked to talk a little bit about that. What this award has meant to me is it's a token of, it's a recognition, and it's an endorsement of what we are doing in the college. It's an award whose significance is not diminished by another award I received at the beginning of this year. It was an award that was given to me by the undergraduate student government for distinguished academic leadership. I'm very proud of that, but this award, that award does not diminish this. I'm happy to have both. For which I want to thank you. I want to thank the provost and the chancellor for the award. I want to thank, the provost said that's my routing section. I want to thank my routing section back there. My departmental colleagues, my colleagues in the college, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for helping me do what I do. Thank you for bearing with me and my idiosyncrasies every day. And I thank all of you for coming here and staying on and listening to me ramble for a few minutes. So thank you very much.
I think that in giving the award, the Chancellor in giving the award offered a form of recognition, but we did not have very much by way of self-disclosure on the part of the recipients. I think the presentation this afternoon allowed for some of this self-disclosure. And I think we ought to recognize the special group that we have with us that we call our faculty, and 3 members who engage with us this afternoon, their commitment to service. Now, I'm going to say to Paul that the term flagship has rather interesting meaning. Among them, they are most dependent of ships to be defended by others. If you ever go to search its meaning. We operate, of course, under the Saxon report that speaks of world-class universities. And California is supposed to be the model to an extent that we'd follow. And please remember that while Berkeley is said to be the flagship, it is frequently exceeded in status, depending on what's emphasis, by University of California, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, San Diego, Davis, etc., etc. But I think the part of what we have seen this afternoon is the sociology of knowledge in operation. That there is an intimacy between knowledge and relationships. And these relationships take many forms. And each of our presenter reminded us of this. And that we take service not as a tertiary measure, but as a proud, distinguishing feature of our university. And you know where the Chancellor stands on that. I don't know whether the speakers would entertain a question or two from colleagues. Just briefly, however, because we have to continue the entertainment here that is provided for you, and some of you told me that you've got to rush to other activities. So do you have a question or two for our colleagues? Anyone? Thank you. I think we have passionate colleagues, and we join them in saying thank you again.